And hello good people of the internet, it is I, Tommy Kelly, and this is Adventures in Woo-Woo. And in this episode, I thought I would talk about the light and breezy and not at all heavy topic of what happens when we die. Now, I have no idea what happens when we die, and I'm highly suspicious of anyone who says they do. Although that said, I suppose there is a part of me that still kind of thinks that there's some kind of Eastern mystic. I don't know why they're all Eastern, but in my head, all the real, cool spiritual dudes, the really adept, the masters are all Eastern. I suppose that's just because of theosophy and this kind of stereotypical, probably racist kind of. Well, is it racist when you're kind of elevating people? It is, because you're still separating races. We're all the same race. Anyway, getting off track. Anyway, in some part of the world, I am sure there's someone who has been really progressing spiritually and is some sort of spiritual master who may, in fact, know what happens when we die. And I know that I've met people who certainly claim to know. But I still think we should be suspicious of it because we don't know. Anyway, to get on to the actual topic, what do I think happens when we die? Well, this has changed many times over the years from depending on what kind of paradigm I've been enjoying at the time. For a long while I did kind of, growing up, being that I was a Catholic and all that, I had that kind of heaven and hell dichotomy where, good people went to this cloud city and hung out with white robes. And you did kind of believe that because that's literally what you were told to believe. And that, hell was... Although hell, we have this kind of thing of fire and brimstone, but in my kind of head, when I was a kid, it was like a number of cells, like stone cells, like prisons, where everyone kind of went in and had their own individual torture. I'm sure I must have seen that in a film or something. So what I actually kind of think now is that I don't know, as I said, but that one of the things that keeps coming back to me about what it feels most likely, say there is, let's accept for the moment that there is more going on than what the reductionist materialists think. And that when you die, some form of you continues to live. I highly doubt that Tommy Kelly continues to live in any way that would be recognizable to Tommy Kelly or to other people. And as Brad Warner always points out, he goes like, if reincarnation is a thing, if it's true, then it doesn't matter because we can't remember our past lives. And we are the reincarnated person. And so all the things that have gone before us are kind of, irrelevant for the most part because they're not actually playing a part in your life. Now, I know you can say there's a karma thing and there's life lessons and spirit families and all this, but in general, we're not aware of it. We don't know. We can't see the ties. We can only kind of infer that maybe we have a closeness to other people that we don't, the closeness to some people that we don't have to other people that we might, decide is some sort of soul contact or something. But again, we don't know. So I would assume that when you die, what happens is that all of the things, not assume, what I maybe, this is my current kind of what I'm thinking about. So when you die, all of your actions and all of your interactions and all of the things that that have happened to you, all of the, your life's history, all the emotion is stripped from it. And you're kind of presented it with it just as from like a very kind of objective view of it. And this is kind of riding on the kind of idea that we're on some sort of learning thing, or that we're a part of, it's an evolving thing, like evolution. If Alan Chapman, and amongst others, talks about that, the lesser informs the bigger, or the lesser is found within the bigger and the greater, and the greater is found within the lesser. So if evolution is a thing that happens on this planet, which it certainly seems to be the best theory going, then that also would suggest that in the microcosm of evolution here on the planet, the macrocosm would suggest that there's an evolution going on there too, because it's found in the lesser, found in the greater. So that's what going on the principle that it's some sort of evolution thing. So that if when we die and you pull away all of the emotions surrounding things and you see things objectively, you have obviously an objective view on your life and what could have been better, what could have been worse, what you could have done. Or some sort of, I don't know, like, your life flashes before your eyes, or, there's some sort of recounting that goes on. Whether that's just, pulling you out of your, like if you were in a game, I suppose, if this was a simulation and you come out, you have to kind of reacclimatize to the real world, and perhaps that's some way of taking that out. But the most thing that people kind of do is just, to see they have loved ones coming to them, and there's like, a bright light, and there's all of this sense of love and joy. Apart from it, there was a documentary I watched once where some people had a very hellish experience of, like near-death experiences. So I don't know. There's another kind of book I read, I think I found through RuneSoup, which was saying that one of the things that nurses know in nursing homes is when the patients are going to die before, like the medical, before their doctor knows, or like, there's an actual medical reason, because they start talking or seeing people that are dead. So that's interesting. Whether that's true or not, that's something that I found that we're not really allowed to talk about because it's kind of in the woo territory. But even if it is just a sort of a brain function that happens, it's still an interesting thing, and it still, consoles people. And it's, for the people who recount these type of stories, it seems to be a pleasurable thing for people where they have to sort out some, past relationships or some sort of falling outs, and, things can get kind of finished and complete before they move on, which I think that's quite nice, and I hope that's true. I would say that, or I would believe, or I'm currently thinking, whatever, no definites in any of this, that if we are to go with the kind of the right-hand path of things, that you're returning to the Godhead or whatever when you die, then there would be no individuality, and your part of consciousness, the greater consciousness that is kind of the pinpoint that came into this life, say, when that goes, I'd say you kind of return to the big things, so that there's no kind of independent. I'm not really convinced on reincarnation anyway, but I'm not really convinced on that there's some unique individualized me that goes from life to life to life. It seems more likely that if there is a kind of a consciousness that's ejecting into the world, that it would inject, and then, just return to the bigger thing, rather than having tiny little individual parts of itself that goes around the world and learn, or, get into life or whatever. But I don't know, it's an interesting kind of thought, or, mind game to kind of play. Excuse me, my voice on my throat was getting very dry. So ultimately, the thing of that, like, when I met Stuart Wilde, he was, I was obviously very excited. I was quite young at the time, and he was one of my heroes, my spiritual heroes and all this. And he had he had a couple of people around him, like not hangers on, but kind of minders, or I don't know, part of his entourage, whatever. And he got one of them to chill me out, because I was, obviously, you've seen my energy was very spiky and stuff like that. I know, very woo. But she put her hands on my head and kind of calmed me down. And what she said to me is that I'm not terrified of dying, I'm terrified of living. And I kind of went, oh, that's very trite, and thing. But I think that's true. I'm not actually terrified of dying, even though that when I look at things like when I'm going to die, that it worries and bothers me. I'm not afraid of the dead bit, I suppose. I'm afraid of what leads up to it, like the sickness, the feeling alone, and having to go through it alone seems to be a big thing for me, in that this is the thing that you do totally by yourself. No one can come with you. And that's the bit. It's like the dead bit, like, because if there's nothing, if you die and that's it, grand. I'm 100% okay with that, because how can you not be 100% okay with that? I think people, anyone who's not okay with that, kind of feels that their consciousness is just sitting in a black ether, floating around forever or whatever. But if you go to sleep and then just never wake up, but you're not dreaming, you're not doing anything, there's nothing there, what's there to worry about? You just, you're dead, it's over, that's it. Grand with that. In fact, in many different times in my life, I was like, I would not seek it, but I would have been consoled by that, going like, grand, at least it's over. At some point I'll get a rest and it'll be done. It's not rest, you come back from them, I suppose. But if this idea of that when you die and then you instantly go into another body and you come back, and you wonder kids scream when they go, oh, not here again, Crowley says, I think there's just like a 6-month period between lives, but I think he was kind of saying things like that so he could work out the cool people that he could have been in the past, even if it didn't line up with birth dates and stuff like that. So I don't know exactly what when the soul would enter the body, and that's a huge debate of when an embryo becomes human and all that. And I am not a medical doctor, so I am not going to weigh in that at all. But yeah, so I mean, there's loads of different things. The Barda stuff from the Tibetan Buddhism is interesting. That you hang around your body for a number of days, and prayers and things have to be said over to you to get your journey along the way. The Egyptians have similar things. Well, they're so concerned about the journey and that you can get lost. And even George Harrison and through his like Krishna stuff would be that you're constantly his spiritual practice is practicing for death. So at the moment of death, you're prepared for it and you're able to die in the way that you want, because they would believe, the Hare Krishnas, that your mind at the moment of death is what determines what your next life has been. So you can have an entire life of being wonderfully great, and at the moment of you die, you think of something horrible, or you think of something selfish or fearful or whatever. That is the thing that determines what happens to you next. So you're practicing, you're chanting, you're keeping God consciousness, you're building all this. So at the moment of your death, you can remain God consciousness and then return to God, because that would be of very much the right hand path of they want to return to God rather than the left hand delineation. Take it for what you will, which is to be your own God, or to evolve to be your own God, which is probably, I think, seems to make more sense, because in the God thing of, if God is God, why would he limit himself to then become God again? Alan Watts has loads of different things over that it's a hide and seek game and all of that, and I've talked a bit about that before. If you're interested in that, check out Alan Watts. Whereas with the kind of seeing the whole thing as the reproduction cycle of a god, where a god splits off to become many gods, and then that's the the evolutionary thing. It seems more likely to me as a thing, but again, don't know. So it's been a bit rambly, of course, as it has to be, because there's no facts around these type of things, and there's probably if I was sitting here talking to you, we could have many more kind of ideas around us and battle it out a bit more. Not battle it out, batter it out a bit more. But what are your thoughts? What do you think happens when you die? What do you believe? What would you like to happen? What do you think is going to happen? And do you feel that is reincarnation a thing for you? Is is this whole idea of that energy can't be destroyed? Does that mean that consciousness goes on? Does consciousness cease to exist when we die? Are you a reductionist materialist? If you are, it's very unlikely that you're watching this video, but maybe you are. Maybe you are. Who am I to say? So, good people of the internet, until our next adventure, I will see you tomorrow. And be safe, be well, and may your best days be ahead. Later.